Wait, it should be live now.
Oh, perfect. Should I kick us off? All right. Welcome, everyone. If this is the first time that you're joining us, Terraforming Web3 is a program all about bridging the gap between the emerging Web3 gaming ecosystem and the well-established Web2 gaming industry, especially on StarkNet that provides the necessary scale, creativity, and player experience needed to push gaming forward. We believe gaming is the ideal environment to pioneer new technologies, especially in Web3. Gamers have historically embraced innovation early. Think GPUs, VR, and motion controls, which then become mainstream. Games provide developers with a safe environment to experiment, push limits, and quickly refine ideas without high stakes. Crypto native games are poised to be the next big frontier. They have the potential to reshape not just entertainment, but how we interact digitally across all domains. The intuitive, engaging experiences we build here will pave the way for broader digital and crypto adoption in every sector. That's why we're very excited about this program. Each session has explored practical insights necessary to understand the Web2 and Web3 gaming landscape. With that in mind, let's quickly recap where we've been so far. In our first session, from Web2 to Web3, we explored the current gaming landscape, how indie and AAA studios differ, and where indie devs can step in to innovate. Next, we covered building Web3 gaming ecosystems, where we broke down successful ecosystems, the importance of sustainable economies, and strategies for community building. In the last session, we dug into tokenomics and new models for gaming, discussing how strong tokenomics shapes game design, player engagement, and new monetization methods. Today, in session 4, we're shifting our focus towards partnerships. We'll cover how to form strategic alliances in Web3, explore effective collaboration models, and discuss how great partnerships can actually accelerate growth and innovation in the gaming space. So let's get it started. So please welcome our first speaker for today, Kim. Kim is the head of partnerships and marketing at Decentraland, a social virtual world that lets users explore, connect, and create in a fully decentralized metaverse. There, Kim leads partnerships, develops go-to-market strategies, hosts community building events, and communicates Decentraland's value to brands, creators, and new audiences. Today, she'll be discussing crafting partnerships that matter. And then we'll follow it up with Gabe, the COO of Cartridge. Cartridge, as many of you remember, is a comprehensive, fully on-chain gaming infra platform on StarkNet and a major player behind many games building on StarkNet today. Gabe will be presenting on modular game design. So Kim, I'll let you take it over. Thank you very much for being here.
Awesome. Thank you. I am so excited to be here. Let me know you all see the screen okay? Good to roll. All right. So I am talking today beyond logo soup, crafting partnerships that matter. I know so many of us, especially if you're in the crypto or the gaming space, so many partnerships end up being, allow list exchange or like logo, X logo, and that's kind of where the partnerships end. And so what I wanted to talk through about is the variety of partnerships and what you can really do at different tiers. This is pretty much a high level conversation around partnerships and what's possible. And Gabe will go a lot deeper on game design from a technical perspective as well. So leading into this, there are multiple types of partnerships you can think about. As Dylan mentioned, I am from Decentraland. So Decentraland is a social virtual world for anyone that's not familiar. And within Decentraland, we can have a ton of different levels of partnerships. So that's where I will draw some of these experiences and examples from. But this can apply to any game or any project that you are building. So there are 5 types of partnerships that I like to consider when I am building all of this at scale. So when I think about the obvious one, it's co-marketing. So how can you ensure that both brands are putting the message out there and getting this to light? The second would be tech stack. So our teams both have something that we really need, and we want to ensure that we partner up to build the best products that we can. The third being event specific. So if you have a big event coming up, maybe a partnership makes sense for that. And that can be an in real life event, like a physical world event like ETH Denver or GDC, or it could be an event you're hosting around your game or your platform. So for us, our next big event is Metaverse Fashion Week. So we think about what types of partnerships make sense for that event in particular that may be different than the partners we consider throughout the year. The fourth bucket is growth and advertising. So of course, we are all looking to expand the amount of people that are aware of our product and then using our product. So growth and advertising partners can be traditional, very exchange driven, but can also dive much deeper into that experience. And then the fifth for us that's really important, and I'm sure many of you in this audience as well, is builder partnerships. So if you are having a lot of people that can contribute to your game, to your experience, to your product, builders are super important. So where do you find builders? How do you partner with builder communities? And how do you ensure that the people that have the skills to be a part of your community are there? So let's dive a little bit into each one with a little bit more specific. So when I think of co-marketing partnerships, it's really about community overlap and product use. Who is already using your product that would make sense to partner? So this is one where I like to go internal first. So look around your community. Where are those people from? What are they already doing? And do their ecosystems make sense as a partnership? An example that is really prevalent in our community is the A Kid Called Beast community. If anyone's familiar, we have A Kid Called Beast, which is an NFT project. A lot of our Decentraland community members happened to also hold A Kid Called Beast NFTs. So we brought the teams together. One of the lead community members there at A Kid Called Beast said, I would love to start hosting like A Kid Called Beast parties every single Friday night in Decentraland. And we were like, okay, there's really cool stuff that we could also integrate into that. One of our products is linked wearables. You can take your NFT, and if someone joins Decentraland with that A Kid Called Beast NFT, we can make sure they show up in world with A Kid Called Beast representation, which is the mask that they all wear. And so it's just that one came super natural to the community. And A Kid Called Beast leaders saw it and said, okay, this is a benefit we can offer our community members by something that was naturally available. And the community really took the lead on that. So my first piece of advice on these is like, look under the hood. What are people already doing? What are they already finding? And what types of overlaps do you already see? And turn that into a mutually beneficial joint marketing partnership. Another example we talked about is tech stack partnerships. So these are where I definitely get the product team more involved. So actual product usage and integration. So you could think about it at multiple levels. I think about it as the very base, like, okay, what engines are we using? Obviously, as a marketing and partnerships person, I'm not making that decision, but our team is making that decision for a reason. How do we build stronger partnerships at each level? So we have the engine. Then in Decentraland and in many games, like what are you using for 3D assets? Our team is using Blender. Great. Can we partner with Blender and do some tutorials? What stuff is available to the community to make that partnership and that product usage stronger? And then for us, we were looking at how can we make it less of a hurdle to jump into Decentraland. Many of you in Web3 totally understand that, like, not only is it hard to onboard someone to your product, but if they've never even gotten a wallet, you have to then carry that burden and onboard them to the whole ecosystem. So we said, who's already solved that problem? We partner with Magic Labs that allows for Web2 integration really quick. So you could sign up with any product with a email, a Twitter login, a Discord login, etc. So going through your entire tech stack and saying, okay, who are we using naturally because we think their product solves our problems? And then going out and saying, how can we dive deeper into this, create a more full funnel partnership as we grow? And this is something we've done. Example, we just did a quest with Magic. So using both sides of the equation, both the tech and the marketing side to go deeper into partnerships. So I definitely encourage everyone, look at your full tech stack. Like, who are you using for so many pieces of what you're building? And if you're using that product, I'm sure they have audience alignment with you, and you could figure out ways to kind of work together. Dylan, we still good? Perfect. All right, event-specific partnerships. I know one of the things that we've seen a lot in gaming that's gone really well is like e-gaming, live competitions, live events, and that can happen outside your platform or also in world. So think about industry or themed activations and how you can partner. So example, in Decentraland, like I said, Fashion Week is a big thing for us. So we go out and say, okay, what fashion brands make sense? Web 2, Web 3, who is it that emulates fashion that we want a partnership with? Same with Music Fest. I have a case study at the end where we can dive a little deeper into the levels of partnership you can go. And then brand driven, one of the fun ones that's relevant to gaming is Mountain Dew partnered up for a esports live competition in New York City with the Subliners back a few years ago, and they did a live in New York City, I believe it was, event where there was an esports competition, and then we live streamed it into Decentraland so that they could get more global audience. Because when you do live events, think about geographically who can join from that event. Is that your full audience, or is there a way to expand that event to have a digital footprint, and what partners can help you to do that as well? So really getting more bang for your buck on those events and ensuring you're thinking multi-channel across the board. Doritos, another example, they do Super Bowl ads. I mean, I'm sure we've all saw Doritos Super Bowl ads. They do them kind of every year, and they were thinking, okay, what partners can give us more legs on this Super Bowl campaign? Some people are watching the ads online, but many have more online experiences. They maybe don't have cable, they're not watching TV, and they brought their full activation into Decentraland, built a full, like, entire world. You could make music with the chip crunches, and you could do a parkour that's all like Dorito steps. So, like, really thinking, what do I traditionally do? And like, what could be unique for this partner? They couldn't be doing that on their TV campaign. That makes no sense. But it does make sense in a virtual world where you can say, okay, I could take the sounds from the TV campaign, and people in Decentraland love to do something. So let's build a parkour. That makes sense for this audience. Let's build, their wearables are still one of my favorite. It's like an orange glow because when you eat Doritos, like your hands get a little orangey, you get speckles everywhere. And so they did wearables that were like orange and glowy. And so thinking about what is unique to each partnership where you can take what that community and that product does best and really bring it to light. And that does take a lot more work and a lot more lead time, which we'll get to, but making something that feels unique to that experience will make that partnership stick so much more. I think also with those examples, they reached out to our communities and did campaigns with like our own influencers. So also keep in mind, each community and brand you're partnering with probably has like a group of super users. How can you activate as part of your partnership that community super users? So thinking through that, one of our super users actually filmed as a teaser, filmed his entire car filled with Dorito bags and posted it on social to say like Doritos is coming to Decentraland. It was super fun, super innovative, and that wouldn't have happened in the traditional space. So just diving deeper on those is super helpful. Oh, and I meant to pull this one up, but that's an example of some of what they built, which was an entire studio. And so thinking about, again, lengthy interactions and participations for communities that want to engage. If you build for the right people, they'll want to do your product versus, I always say, some partnerships you're looking and it's just X versus X, and there's nothing of substance behind it. So how are you going to make people thumb stop when they're doing that scroll? That's what's happening, and say, oh, that's interesting. That looks cool. That looks different. Let me dive deeper. And then traditional ads. I mean, I know a lot of people say Web3 people should never do traditional ads. I disagree. I don't know. I know that's a hot take with a lot of people. It depends on your targeting, but I think Reddit is one of the best places to find insights on actual consumer usage, user behavior, what's going on. Probably, especially in Web3, I would say Twitch, other ones like that as well. Like, what are people actually doing? What problems are they having? What are they interested in? The gaming community on Reddit, I get alerts every day. It is huge. And I would consider that traditional Web 2. You can do Reddit ads. And I think a lot of people think Web3 and they think Twitter, but I want to just say there is a huge missed opportunity if you're only thinking in the Twitter, Telegram, Discord realm. There's a whole other world of people interested in the problems you're solving out there. So really think about what traditional things make sense. Not everything does. But I personally believe Reddit's a good example. We actually just started a partnership with Brave. For anyone that's not familiar, but I'm assuming most people here are, Brave is like the browser that focuses really hard on privacy. We know that's important to our community as a core value. So we said, okay, that's a core value with us. They are an advertising partner. If we were going to do Google ads anyway, like why wouldn't we partner with Brave instead? Because we know there's immediately more value alignment. So just thinking about, okay, these are the channels people traditionally do. What is a Web3 friendly version of it? Where is the Web3 audience currently hanging out? Another example is Addressable. I don't know how familiar people are here, but they do on-chain targeting and rewards driven. So think about wallet targeting based on what's happening in people's wallets. How can you then use a partner that is tracking that information using AI and different techniques to say this user can get this ad based on just wallet information. So there is a lot out here. These are just a few examples that I've looked into or used or considered in the past. Galaxy and Drops, really great ones that I know a lot of people use for questing. I personally prefer quests that are engagement driven versus just vanity metrics. So I don't recommend doing quests for follows necessarily, but more so a quest of, hey, we want to see a lot more interesting content around X, or we want you to come into our product and try XYZ. That's where I think questing has really unique positioning in Web3 because you can reward along the way, especially if you're doing on-chain work. And then think about builder partnerships. So in Web3, one of the best parts about it is a lot of people can build and can contribute, and many products are decentralized. So where do you find the people that have those skills and are able to do that building with you? Where are they sitting? What are they working on? So that could be big groups like Sandstorm, or it could be individual studios. I listed a few that we work with like Dapcraft, Metaskins, Vegas City. In gaming, there are a ton of gaming studios out there and little indie studios that can do different parts for you. So finding the builder partnerships and going with them and saying, okay, let's establish long-term relationships that we can work on over time, continually reward your work, and then work together to grow the ecosystem in a much bigger way. I think as we're thinking Web3, it's like, where do you find the Web3 devs? Where do you find the Web3 content creators? Where do you find the Web3 wearable makers? These are the people that can build behind the scenes in the ecosystem in your community and making sure you find others that are similar in the whole ecosystem across the board. Feel free if you have questions, drop them in the chat as well. And I know the team can help at the end. So another thing I just want to talk about is incentive alignment. So like when you're thinking about partnerships, I don't want to lie, we get like hundreds of emails a week saying like, hey, I want to partner with Decentraland, but then there's no substance. Like, why should we partner? What makes sense to partner? And there could be multiple reasons depending on where your brand is today. So you could be looking at top of funnel, like I need awareness, I need brand alignment, I need to look like I'm partnering with brands that are reputable. That is a valid reason to partner with someone. Top of funnel also could be press visibility. It could be this is a good story. Or content creation. Like I need some people to create content in an authentic way that's not coming from myself. Sometimes, people buy from people, not brands. So who are the people that they would go for? Who are the people they follow? And then thinking about maybe you're at a point where you're looking for bottom of funnel. You're looking for revenue generation. You're looking for user acquisition. So just being clear internally with your teams of like when a partnership comes up, like what are we trying to do? What are the real KPIs? What part of the funnel are we looking for? And there should be partnerships along the whole way that get you there. And it is not all about the money. I've done tons of partnerships that are little money, no money, barter. It totally depends on what each one needs. We're a nonprofit, for example. So I'm not trying to get money from a lot of partners. I'm trying to find the people that have the right value alignment and the right KPIs. So just something to bring to people. I know a lot of times when I talk about partnerships, everyone immediately goes to the money side. And it doesn't have to be. There can be really successful partnerships that have multiple KPIs that are not just, I need to drive revenue. I know that's a shock for many people. And then one of the things I also get asked, if it's not money, like what could a KPI look like? So these are just some examples of ones I've used, like announcement, reactions, and sentiment. That one's a little bit more vanity, but like number of podcast invites we got, number of syndication of press, pieces of unique UGC content created about it. And then if you're on the growth side, like actual signups, actual downloads, DAUs for games, number of new creators that publish something in the ecosystem, engagement time. How much time did users from that partnership spend in the product or in the experience with us? And of course, revenue collection is always one you could have on the chart, but I think it's helpful to understand like what are other KPIs you can bring to your leadership team to say this worked. So just high level recap, like what partnerships make sense for you. There are 5 types that I like to consider. So thinking you might want some in each bucket, or depending on the phase you're in, you might be solely in growth phase or solely in we're building the tech stack. I only need to worry about this part right now, but thinking along the whole scope. And a very quick case study that I just wanted to share is make it super easy for people to participate with you. We said originally for Music Fest, anyone that wants to be interested and has a Web3 music product that they think would be interesting, fill out this form and we will custom make you this gorgeous booth in World. We made it super easy. Partners were like, absolutely, I would love to do that. Here's my assets. And then when we found ones that were really engaged and really evolved, we were saying, okay, how can we take them to tier 2, the next level? Coop Records, for anyone that's not familiar, they're an on-chain music label and they can mint all of their music. And we were like, okay, cool. Decentraland's great for DJs and parties. Let's bring one of their artists in. Then we can mint that set on-chain. People can collect it, remember their experience. And anyone that comes to the concert can get an exclusive wearable on-chain. That's an NFT. And so like a simple ask of a basic partnership blew into something much, much bigger beyond just logo placement in World. And then when values align, go much, much deeper. You could see like there was content going both ways and it felt really dual in that experience. And wrapping up with the key takeaways, longer lead times allow for that creativity and that flexibility to come to the table. Discuss early, what is it you're really trying to do? If it's not revenue, awesome. Like, what is it? What does your leadership team care about? Finding real synergies with the community that you're trying to surface. What do they care about? What partnerships will interest them? Think beyond the money and be flexible and creative. I think the most fun of partnerships is like building something new and something that isn't cookie cutter to say like, we created something unique for this experience. And that is it. Dylan, are we good on time?
You can speak for as long as you want, Kim. This is incredible. I love this. I have a ton of questions too. I know we're getting some
Awesome.
questions in the chat, but
Cool.
yeah, happy to answer some questions, or we can just jump to Gabe and then do a Q&A with both of you, because I think you both come from different angles and we'll have very good insight into some of the questions too.
Yeah, if the questions overlap, I'll let Gabe go and then we can tackle them together. Does that work for you?
Yeah, whichever works for me.
Perfect. Let's go with that then, Gabe. It's on your
Right.
time.
Okay, let's see. Let me get my presentation up here. Can you all see this? Yep, you can see it. Okay, cool. Okay, well, Kim, thank you for presenting. I'm going to kind of approach this from a little bit of a different angle, and I think in order to do that, I'll kind of introduce, what we're working on. So I'm Gabe. I'm the COO of Cartridge. We build high performance infrastructure for building provable and fully on-chain games. And so I think that taking just a quick moment to answer this question of like what fully on-chain games will go a long way in kind of framing this presentation. And so this will be the most simple slide of the presentation here. But really kind of like what are fully on-chain games? There's a whole library of blog posts kind of attempting to answer this question from different angles, but I'll kind of boil it down to like, two really simple things. One is open source, and really what this means is if you think about like traditional game design using like an entity component system or whatever, all of the systems, the entities, the things that kind of compose the actual game are open source. And so as opposed to a traditional game where your only levers to play this game are like a controller or a keyboard input, in theory, a fully on-chain game you could play entirely just by kind of calling the systems, directly. So one is open source. And the other is decentralized game state. And what that really means is that, as opposed to, a Web2 game where if the publisher shuts down the game servers, the game world disappears. In a fully on-chain game, all the game state is decentralized, and so you kind of put these two components together, and what you get is kind of this idea of more like modular games, and so that's really kind of the core of my presentation, what we're going to get into. This next slide is a little scary. There's a lot of information here, but bear with me. This is really kind of the anchor of this presentation, and all we're going to do is kind of walk through these 5 buckets and talk about how each of these different components give you a new opportunity to kind of partner with different groups and organizations as you're kind of endeavoring to build your game. So let's run through these 5 really quickly. I think that you'll find that they're quite simple and straightforward. This is kind of my best attempt to make a non-technical, very imperfect kind of architecture diagram of what kind of a fully on-chain game or provable game looks like. And so starting at the top with ecosystem, this is really simple and straightforward. You're just really thinking about where your players hang out. In a kind of a traditional game world, this is, guilds is kind of probably one of the primary places where players congregate. And so in the kind of crypto native world, we have their counterpart in DAOs, and there's a lot of overlap. I'll talk a little bit about kind of the difference between the two. The next layer down here that we have is the world, and here's a place where like the imperfection of this framework, is kind of on display because world and DAOs oftentimes overlap, and we'll kind of see that for anybody in the audience who's familiar with Dope Wars or Realms. I think that'll be really obvious. But in this context, world really means the primitives that compose your on-chain game world. So it's the places, the items, the players themselves. Where do those things exist? And kind of how do they interact with your game world? So the next one down here is interaction, and so this kind of is the question that precedes world is how do players interact with that world? If you have some cool NFT asset that represents a player or a place or an item, how do players actually kind of engage and play this game? And so the kind of 2 things that we'll talk about there are the game client itself, and then wallets that people use to play these games. The 4th one here is game logic, and so this really kind of talks about how this game world functions, right? Like how do you call these systems that really inform how combat resolves or trading happens or crafting, these kinds of things. And then the last one is the game state. So where does this decentralized game state live? Is it on Starknet? Is it on Celestia? Is it on, kind of, some other network? So anyway, this is kind of like this framework. And so, I'm going to take a little bit of time to run through these 5 buckets and talk about opportunities to partner within each of these. So without further ado, we'll get into ecosystem. This one is fairly straightforward. Like I said before, the 2 kind of primary things here that we'll talk about are guilds and DAOs. Guilds, I'm sure everyone is familiar with. Friends and players kind of hanging out. Some are competitive, some are casual. They're hanging out in Discord. And what I would say, like, more kind of like currently with like new guilds these days is that a lot of them are creating content. I've been a huge fan of watching Only Fangs, the World of Warcraft hardcore guild, as they've been Twitch streaming over the last couple months. It's been a lot of fun for me. But for those of you in the audience that are less familiar with fully on-chain games, DAOs kind of, you could say, would be like the crypto native counterpart to guilds. And so they function very similarly. I've got 2 examples here, Game 7 and Wolves DAO. In that, like, it's a group of players that play games together, they care deeply about these games, but some nuance between DAOs and guilds might be that DAOs tend to have on-chain treasuries. And so while a guild might have a treasury in game, like a World of Warcraft guild has kind of a shared treasury with gold and resources, a DAO might actually have an on-chain treasury where they have tokens and assets from those game worlds. And so there's kind of some nuance there, and you can imagine how that creates an opportunity to partner with some of these guilds by sharing some of your assets with them. A lot of them have kind of on-chain voting mechanisms and other things that they're doing to kind of experiment with innovative things that they can do by virtue of being on-chain. And so I would just say, kind of at the top player level, you can think about these being great opportunities to engage with players, share assets with them that they can use to play your game, and so on and so forth. So this one's fairly straightforward. Moving forward, let's talk a little bit about worlds. This is one of my more favorite buckets. And it's kind of the story that got me really interested in fully on-chain games as a player myself. So a lot of you in the audience may be familiar with Loot. Loot is an NFT project that dropped in 2021 that really kind of like broke open this whole idea of fully on-chain games. And it was very simple. Each Loot NFT was kind of a bag, as you can kind of see represented on screen here, that would contain a list of items. And the really simple kind of cool idea with Loot was, I'll move to the next slide here. Um, as opposed to what we had been seeing in the NFT space, where you launch an NFT project and then you promise all this cool stuff on top of it. We're going to build a game, there's going to be a Netflix show, there's going to be all this cool stuff. Loot kind of flipped that model on its head and said, we're just going to drop these primitives. And if you buy an NFT, because these are open source, anyone can build games on top of them. So, if you were somebody who bought a loot bag, the idea was that all these open source, otherwise unrelated studios could come along and build game experiences on top of these loot bags. And so it introduced this new idea that these kind of existing game worlds, are out there, and you can, as a studio, choose to build a game for an existing audience using open source IP. So it's kind of this cool new idea. With Loot, a bunch of other kind of derivative projects spawned around the same time. And so one that's very kind of closely tied up with the origin story of Cartridge was Dope Wars. And so you can see on the right, it's a very similar kind of approach, but Dope Wars was kind of in this Grand Theft Auto theme. And so as you can see here, once you open this Dope Wars NFT, it has its list of, kind of assets, the gold shirt, the Gucci slides, weapons, these kinds of things. And you could kind of equip those things onto your Dope avatar, which you can see kind of framed here on the left. And the idea was that, these avatars would be used in game experiences that were built on top of them. Yeah, we'll flip to the next one. Just kind of watching time here. I'll give you another example. Realms is another kind of loot derivative project that spawned around the same time, but as opposed to kind of a character with items, the primitive was a realms world, which you can kind of think of like a city or a region that you as a player would own as an NFT, and that city has inherent traits. So it might have a list of resources, stone, copper, wood, etc. And again, the idea was that developers could come along and they could build entire game experiences on top of these primitives. And so if you, these are kind of just two examples here, but there are a ton of these kind of on-chain ecosystems, and you can look around and you can kind of examine, what are the primitives here? Why do I think that they're interesting? And also, what do their audiences look like? And so as you're kind of endeavoring to build a game, as opposed to a Web2 experience where you're building the game from scratch, you're building the IP from scratch, unless you're paying to leverage it, and you're also, bootstrapping an audience from scratch. The decision to build a game on top of one of these existing worlds, you get a built-in audience of people who already, really deeply care about the lore and are excited about it. So this is kind of the idea of what a world is, which brings us to the next layer here, interaction. So we have these cool NFT worlds that have primitives that you can build on top of. The next question that this begs is, how do you actually interact with these worlds as a player? So there are two primary things here. One is clients and the other is wallets. Clients is a really interesting concept for someone who's unfamiliar with fully on-chain games, because we're used to this idea in gaming where when a game ships, there's no kind of differentiation between a client and the game world. It's all the same thing. You download the game, you log in, you start playing, and that's your kind of immersive experience in that world. But something that's really cool about fully on-chain games, as I described earlier, you can build different experiences on top of this same set of primitives. And so this same dope NFT that you see on the left here has an entire ecosystem of experiences that were built by perhaps the same or sometimes different dev teams. And so it might be a marketplace, it might be a series of different games, it might be, cool ways to kind of like flex your hustler. And as we kind of continue here, you'll see this is a game that our team Cartridge built in this kind of Dope Wars world. And so this is a readaptation of a classic game from the 80s and 90s called Drug Wars, and we rebuilt it kind of in the Dope Wars ecosystem. I'll throw another example at you from the Realms ecosystem, which we also talked about earlier. There's a number of different studios that are building experiences on top of the Realms ecosystem. I think the most OG and probably the most ambitious one is called Eternum. Eternum had their season 0 at the end of last year, and season 1 is just a couple weeks away. So if this sounds interesting to you, definitely check them out on Twitter and give them a follow. But it's really this idea that these individual realms that you own can spawn into this, kind of strategy game world, and then you're kind of reenacting like a full battle, like building out your realm in kind of a 4X style, raising an army, gathering resources, battling against other realms, forming alliances. But this is just kind of like one experience or one way to experience this realms world. So I'll hit you with another example here. This is another team that's building within the Realms ecosystem, but as opposed to focusing on the Realm NFT, Loot Survivor by Provable Games focuses on this kind of adventurer, which is an individual that exists within this Realms universe. And the UI that you're seeing here is the original UI client that Provable Games shipped with Loot Survivor. The reason I bring this example up is because quickly a number of members of the ecosystem who were players of this game realized that there was information that was being exposed by the contracts for this game. Remember, right? Because they're open source, that wasn't being exposed in the client. So they built their own client. And so this red version kind of shows with this kind of like hovering table, additional information that wasn't available in the first, client for Loot Survivor. And it was so good that like you couldn't be competitive with the original UI. And this happened again and then again. And so you kind of see this like really interesting phenomenon where someone ships, these world primitives. Another team comes along and builds a game experience on top of it, and the community can iterate and build different clients on top of that game world. And so, there's opportunities, at each layer of this to kind of partner with different groups. There's the world itself, there's the team that's building the experience, and then there's a whole plethora of teams that can come along and build different clients. So I hope that kind of like, brings that point home. The next thing that I want to talk very briefly about is clients. This is an example of a very kind of, standard crypto wallet that, if you're a crypto native, you might be familiar with. This is not my wallet. It's a screenshot from Google. But this is Phantom. It has, kind of like very, like a basic set of things that you would come to expect with this crypto wallet. You'll have a seed phrase when you create it. You'll have a wallet address that you can use to send or receive, and you'll have kind of buy and sell buttons. You know, but what I want to introduce, this is the cartridge controller, which our team has built, and it's really a gaming focused wallet. And so we've introduced a number of additional features to really kind of focus on making a great player experience. So the first one is session keys. Sorry, a little bit of a shill for our own product here. But session keys kind of bundle all the different types of transactions that you might otherwise do in game and kind of pre-approves them the same way you might pre-approve Google to kind of perform certain actions on your behalf. And so as opposed to approving every transaction as you're playing the game, you just kind of bundle the transactions that you'd like the wallet to be able to perform on your behalf, and then you can play seamlessly. Another one that you see here kind of in the screenshot is quests and achievements, integrated into the wallet. So as you're playing these games, quests are kind of guiding you towards interesting experiences in game. You can kind of unlock stuff, leaderboards and game discovery, and all kinds of stuff. You can use your imagination, but there's a whole plethora of wallet providers out there, and choosing one as a partner can be very impactful for your players and their experience in your game. The next one that we'll talk just a little bit about is game logic, and this is really where the game is kind of built. All the logic that informs how combat is resolved, how crafting works, all the real kind of stuff that happens in your game client is informed by the on-chain logic. I was told to keep this like relatively non-technical, so I'm just going to kind of breeze through this at a high level. But really, what I want to kind of focus on with respect to game logic is, there's a number of engines out there for building on-chain games that kind of help you construct this game logic. One of them is Dojo, which the Cartridge team leads. Dojo's, a tool chain and engine for building fully on-chain games, primarily in the Starknet ecosystem. And so if you're using an engine like this, as opposed to building your on-chain game from scratch, your engine is going to provide you with all these different features that you need so that you don't have to worry about building the low-level infrastructure stuff. You can just focus on building that game logic. And so I'm not going to go through all these different kind of parts of the engine. But the other interesting thing that you get when you choose to build with an on-chain game engine is that there's not just kind of the core part of the engine that the team who is leading the development has built. There's all these other open source contributions from the ecosystem as well. So in this case, I'll just kind of like point to two things. One is Origami, which is the kind of aggregate library of different things that people in the Dojo ecosystem, other kind of studios and developers have contributed. And so you can kind of see a list of things here, functions for randomization, digital physics, maps, all kinds of stuff that you can use because they're open source when you're kind of building your own game. The other thing that I'm going to point to is Budokan, which is an on-chain tournament platform that one of the other teams in the Dojo ecosystem built. It's a really robust kind of set of primitives for hosting tournaments on-chain. And so you can imagine here, I'll kind of show you what it looks like. This is kind of an existing tournament that is being run with Budokan right now. This was built by the Provable Games team. Currently, Provable Games has built two games. One is Loot Survivor. The other one is called Dark Shuffle. Actually, there are three, Savage Summit as well. But they're hosting this tournament for Dark Shuffle right now. I think that the registration window may have actually just closed, so sorry if you missed out. But you can kind of get a sense for what's going on here, right? It's a multi-day tournament. You register, you enter, you can move it into the kind of next phase of the tournament. There are prizes. This is also the UI for creating a new tournament, as you can see here. You can kind of gate entry to this tournament. So you can say, hey, only players that have this particular NFT or who participated in the last round of tournaments or, XYZ can participate. You can create fees if you want that can kind of go back to game creators or creators of a particular client or, so on and so forth. And then you can kind of attach prizes to the end of the tournament. And so this, if you were going to be building an on-chain game from scratch, is something that, would take your team weeks, perhaps months to kind of build all this infrastructure. But if you're building with Dojo, you get this for free. So really kind of the reason I bring this up is because when you're choosing something like an engine, you're not just kind of choosing part of a stack, you're also buying into an ecosystem. And that ecosystem is going to have its own set of partners that are contributing open source software that you can use when you're building and deploying your game. Now this was a screenshot of a bunch of the studios that are building in the Dojo ecosystem. Loot Survivor is just kind of one of these teams. So you can imagine, building this tournament contract compounded by the number of teams in the ecosystem. It ultimately becomes a really powerful thing. The last thing that we're going to talk about here is game state. This is kind of a whole can of worms. And the last thing that I want to do is get into a whole discussion about like pros and cons and like a decision-making framework for like choosing where you're going to build and settle your game. But I figure I'd kind of give you like a little bit of a window into this for those that might be unfamiliar with some of these different kind of chains or protocols out there. There's a couple kind of like fundamental differences that people talk about. EVM compatibility is one of them. For rollups in the Ethereum ecosystem, optimistic versus EK, these are some things that you can kind of just, ask ChatGPT and get yourself familiar with. But ultimately, the reason I wanted to kind of bring this out as a part of the partnership conversation is because if you are building with an engine like Dojo, it really frees you up to kind of approach this from a very modular standpoint. And so this diagram might be a little bit scary. Ignore everything here except this kind of last part. Here's your game here on the left side. the game is creating transactions. This whole kind of like proving pipeline is something that we're not going to get into in this presentation at all. But what you can see at the end of the proving pipeline is that you can have your kind of choice of where you want to settle, the state and the transactions that are happening in your game. And so, with this kind of dojo approach, in theory, you could kind of settle the state of your game to any one of these chains. So, I think with that, like I'm just going to jump into a couple case studies. These will go pretty quickly. We talked about Eternum a little bit earlier. Um, the kind of like takeaway, bringing it back home to this like original framework that we introduced at the beginning, is that Eternum as a game, you can see here, has kind of like had the ability in this modular way to pick and choose the partners and the groups that they're going to leverage in order to really bring this game to fruition. So, for season 0 of Eternum, there were, and I think that there were a bunch of guilds, but the two that just came to mind as I was making the slide, they kind of like bridge the gap with these guilds and kind of got the players excited and interested. Eternum is built in the Realms world. It has its own Eternum client. You can use the cartridge controller for onboarding players. I threw in provable games here again. I know I've talked a lot about them during this presentation because one of the things that's going to be really cool about this next version of Eternum is that Eternum, being like a really ambitious game in this Realms world, is going to act as kind of a bridge to some of these other gameplay experiences. There's been a little bit of chatter on this on the Realms Discord, so I don't think this is too much alpha to drop, but imagine this idea that as you're moving through the Eternum world, you step on a new hex tile, and all of a sudden your character kind of drops into a provable games loot survivor dungeon, and all of a sudden you're battling monsters with the opportunity to win the dungeon and kind of bring some resource back into your game of Eternum. And so, as you can think about the kind of different set of client game experiences within one of these game worlds like Realms, you can start to imagine these kind of like interconnected game experiences. And then for game logic, they're building on Dojo, and then the Eternum game is fully on Starknet. Another example that I'll give you here, this is a game called Nums that the Cartridge team built and shipped a couple weeks ago. It's a really simple game. Basically, you would get a random number generated between one and 1,000. And you take that number and you place it in sequence 1 through 20, attempting to get all the way through 20 numbers. It was kind of a fun game that went viral sometime last year. And we really built this as a demonstration of like a new architecture for Dojo, where you could have a game running in an L3 that settles to Starknet. But as you can see here, there is a like different kind of set of partnership choices that we made for the Nums game. The Wolfpack League is a set of creators associated with the Starknet ecosystem that we kind of like, engaged, who were excited about the game. Nums is its own world, but it's also its own client. So these are kind of the same here in this category. And then the stack is the same here, Controller, Dojo, and Starknet. And then I'll hit you with one more example here. Evolute Kingdom is a team, it's a studio, but it's also a world that is going to be building 3 different games. This first one is a game that they build called Mage Duel, which is kind of a Carcassonne, on-chain game. It's beautiful. It was built as part of the Celestia hackathon, which just ended about a week or 2 ago. But the interesting thing that, about the Mage Duel game by Evolute Kingdom is you can see that there was kind of a fundamental difference in architecture choice here. Evolute Kingdom is the world. Mage Duel is the client. Controller and Dojo are the same, but this is using both Starknet and Celestia. So it's using Starknet for some of the more kind of game logic, but ultimately it's using Celestia as a data availability layer. So these 3 case studies are really just kind of meant to give you a different window into some of the different configurations that you can make when you're building a fully on-chain game. And I believe that is it. So thanks, y'all. Appreciate you guys. Let me go ahead and stop sharing here, and I think we can jump into some questions. Hopefully
Awesome.
that wasn't too much.
No, that was incredible. I love it. I think there's a lot of things that there's a lot that we can get into, and I'm glad that you kind of touched on a bunch of the fully on-chain game side as well. I think there's quite an interesting kind of concept, because the reality is partnerships, we take many different forms. But anyway, we have a bunch of questions that we can get to. We have some from the audience, some from me as well, just because I want to dive deeper. I guess, really quickly, I think we talked a lot about find like getting teams to come to you, thinking through the partnership, but what is your process for actually finding and vetting the builder partnerships on a proactive basis? So maybe from the sourcing side, rather than the, waiting for teams to actually come to you. And you both have very big brands. I know a lot of teams go to you directly. Do you kind of just take that as it goes, or are you kind of going out there and sourcing your own deals too?
I can get started if you want. We do go out and kind of source a little bit on our end too. So for example, if we have an idea of something we want to build, we will do some research. We'll look up who's been doing something similar in the past. There's really amazing like hackathon communities, builder communities that exist out here that are kind of game or system agnostic. And so we go out and try to find those. Sandstorm is a great one that is an example that we've used in the past that didn't necessarily come to us, but we saw them building in this space and we went to them and said, hey, we have some ideas. Would you like to partner up? So I think it is a mix. We do get a lot of people coming to us as well, but going out, I also use I'm in a lot of marketing communities. I use X as my platform to like source and just ask other people like, hey, who have you worked with that you really recommend and love? I think using your network to find people that you can trust in this space is also super important.
I would say that from the Dojo ecosystem, really like most of the partnerships in terms of studios and otherwise people that are interested in building, kind of parts of this open source stack have found Dojo organically. And I think that that's or at least like, over the last couple of years, they found us organically. And it's really, I think, a reflection of, fully on-chain games are, this kind of niche and growing concept. And so if you're going to stick around and properly build one of these games, it's something that you care deeply about. Like you understand kind of, the benefits of it from, almost like more of a philosophical standpoint and the kind of benefits that this can have for gaming long term, the practical benefits of the kind of, potential, financialization and, like the kind of composability, all these kinds of things. So, the Dojo ecosystem does regular game jams. We host kind of like Dojo days at a lot of the big like crypto and gaming conferences and things of that nature, but we really don't do a lot of like aggressive outbound. I would say that just really in the last couple months, I would say that like the caliber of teams that like have shown interest in building games with Dojo has really kind of started to hit like an exponential curve. We've got like a bunch of teams that are kind of like more finding out about the ecosystem, taking a closer look at what we're building. But no, we don't really do a whole lot of outbound.
Nice. Well, I'm gonna stick with you, Gabe. I think this is an interesting question, and I'm gonna pick on you just because you mentioned Carcassonne when you were talking a little bit about Evolu Kingdom. So this is an interesting one. What opportunities do you actually see for partnering with existing game franchises to bring their worlds on chain? And I think, Kim, you go a lot broader than that too, with Doritos and Mountain Dew, and some other programs as well that do some marketing within Decentraland. But I'm curious about how you actually want to bring these franchises into the cartridge ecosystem or into Decentraland.
Yeah, it's a really great question. I think that when it comes to like big IP, right? You might think about like the Marvel universe or something of that nature. To some extent, fully on-chain games are kind of antithetical to their traditional business model, right? Like a lot of traditional IP, the kind of model is to protect it very closely and to create these specific experiences that provide opportunities to monetize that IP. If you're building fully open source stuff, the kind of meta for monetization is very different. And so I think that, on the nose, when you like take a meeting with like a big studio that has like some IP rights, it may not make sense to them immediately, but I think that there is kind of a different cohort of IP owners that are really excited about these ideas because ultimately, one of the really cool properties of building fully on-chain games is that these games will live forever. There's no like centralized server to shut down. And so I'm sitting here wondering if I can name names. I probably shouldn't. There's like we're working with like a couple like really legendary like kind of game world IPs. Maybe I'll say like trading card game world IPs who have become interested in building dojo games, and it's for that reason. It's like exploring kind of this new landscape of like how this IP can be interacted with their player base and how it can kind of find like an extended legacy and things of that nature. But for a lot of like people that are very stuck in this traditional paradigm for how IP is used and monetized, I think in some ways it can be incompatible. But I'm really excited to kind of continue these conversations as these things evolve. So it's a great question.
Yeah, totally agree. I think some of the conversations we've had around big brand IP, less games, but more like brand IP, they're very hesitant of like, what can people do with my brand? How does it use? What could be next to us? Because we're fully like UGC world. And so they, like you said, they're really protecting it and really thinking about monetizing. And not all partnerships are monetizable or that's the right KPI. So any big IP that has come into us, we've talked about it as a marketing channel, and discussed like why the audience cares about it, the engagement time. Like, so what is the value of building it here? And for us, it's that these brands with really big IPs sometimes are doing they're doing Instagram ads, they're doing other ways to get people's attention. And we were like, what if you built something more immersive and on chain where you could reward people for being a part of your experience? So like Doritos, they came in and they collected all these Doritos wearables. Now you could reward them forever. You have their wallets. And it's hard for some traditional marketing groups that are usually the people in these conversations initially to understand how they will use this and the value in the future. So I think it's just, again, this is one, like Gabe said, if they understand it, you can maybe get there, but it's a very long lead time, lots of legal, lots of people to talk to. I would say those are sometimes like a year. I'm talking to one that I've been talking to them for at least a year, just trying to get their leadership team understanding the value, how that comes to be. So it depends. I would say going after innovative ones is where I would start, of like people that have tried something new in the past. They seem to have an innovative team, an open mindset. But again, they are all about protecting that IP, and most of our worlds are decentralized, open source, and everything. So it's hard for them to understand that value.
Maybe we can double click on that because I think it's such an important aspect here. When you're dealing with these massive brands, you have different goals and they do, and they have different goals than you do. But there has to be some middle ground that you're trying to find with Doritos or Mountain Dew. How do you get there? Is it just working and talking to them? How do you kind of find those synergies between Decentraland and some of these other big brands where you can say, hey, this actually can lead to great benefits for both of us? How do you narrow that down and actually get to the core crux of why you are even talking in the first place?
Yeah, definitely. I think the biggest part is before you build anything, make sure you have agreement on the what is success, because I mean, everyone's done it. Like everyone thinks they're talking about the same success, and you get to the end and it's like, oh, that wasn't a success for us, but it was for you. So just really be a lot of conversations. Like these are rarely done in one meeting, one conversation. It's how do you say, okay, what is it you're looking to achieve? How can we achieve it? Let's come back to you with new creative ideas that solve both of the needs we have. For us, as long as people are usually aligned on like, we want to create something cool for the community to do and enjoy and collect, that usually works really well. When people come in and right off the bat, they say like, hey, we're trying to make money, I usually start with like, it won't make sense for us. Like we don't want people to use Decentraland in that way. And sometimes you have to turn down something that like is a really cool brand, but it just doesn't value align. And I think that is something that may be more unique to this space than the Web2 space, is like there are a lot of value aligned people, and you could just be like, hey, it just doesn't align with our values right now to partner in this way. If you want to think about it a different way, happy to keep having the conversation. But if not, like for us, we're a community driven platform. If my community is not going to be excited about it and my community doesn't see value, like I'm not here to shill other people's brands.
Nice. I feel like we have time for one more question, hopefully. And I want to just kind of get back to you, Gabe. You mentioned something really interesting. You were saying something along the lines of that existing games, you can tap into this community of passionate fans and existing lore. So how can fully on-chain games that are building on cartridge actually leverage these existing worlds and communities to create richer player interactions using on-chain primitives? I'm just interested in how that kind of how you think about that.
Yeah, I would say if these concepts are new and kind of unfamiliar for anyone in the audience, Realms or Dope Wars are great places to kind of start and just like go to their Twitter, click through their links and kind of start to get a feel for what the anatomy of these ecosystems are like, and what is kind of the relationship between the players and the primitives within that world and some of the games that exist there. And if it's an ecosystem that you're excited about and you can see that there's passion here, you're excited about the lore, you're excited about kind of like the resources and everything that is made available to you by building in that ecosystem. The beautiful thing is that you don't really need permission, because all this stuff is open source, you can just start building. Realms, for example, does have a front in this house grant program. And so if you want to build something in the Realms ecosystem, you can apply for a grant to kind of get you started. But ultimately, the beautiful thing is that building within one of these open source worlds, you don't need permission from anyone to use their IP to build clients. All the stuff is open source. So I would just say, like it's a bit of like having fun and just exploring and being curious, and then, using your imagination to think through like what kind of stuff you could build on top of them. But yeah.
Amazing. I feel like there's so many more questions that we can ask, and I do wish that we can get to every one of them, but we would probably need multiple hours of this session. So I just want to say thank you, Kim, Gabe, once again. Like, this has been absolutely incredible. I appreciate you spending your time here to teach me, teach the audience about partnerships in Web3. Could you quickly share where the viewers can reach you and learn more about what you're building?
Sure. So I'm Kimbo NFT on Twitter, and I'm head of marketing and partnerships at Decentraland. You can find us at Decentraland on X. And from there, you could go to our website, decentraland.org, and get links to all of our socials.
Sweet. And I'm Gabe, Gabe_Ash, like Ash from League of Legends on Twitter. I work at Cartridge_GG on Twitter. I'd say, Cartridge runs an incubator program. If you're interested in building these kinds of games, definitely reach out. I'd be happy to have a conversation. And through the Cartridge page, you can find like the whole ecosystem of games that are being built on Cartridge, Dojo, Starknet, etc. So, yeah, thanks for having us.
Awesome. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Gabe. That wraps us up for today. So thank you again. Next session, we'll dig into practical lessons from veterans who have navigated the Web3 gaming landscape in a topic that we are calling case studies. So looking forward to seeing you all again next week.